My husband's siblings spent years treating me like an outsider, making jokes about me being the gold digger who married into money. At the will reading, they literally made me stand in the hallway while they discussed family business. Then the lawyer called my name as the sole inheritor of a $2.3 million estate. Before I dive into this story of family betrayal and the sweetest revenge imaginable, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever been treated like an outsider by your spouse's family. And subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of justice served cold. And my name is Patricia. I'm 38 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought family meant the people who accept you unconditionally. This story begins with love and ends with the most satisfying moment of vindication I could have ever imagined. I met David Williams when I was 23 and he was 26. I was working as a waitress at an upscale restaurant while finishing my nursing degree, and he was a regular customer who always requested my section. David was kind, funny, and treated service staff with genuine respect, something I noticed because many of his friends didn't. What I didn't know initially was that David came from serious money. His father, Robert Williams, owned a chain of successful auto dealerships across 3 states, plus several real estate investments. The family lived in a mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in town, drove luxury cars, and belonged to the country club where people like me only worked catering events. David never flaunted his wealth around me. He drove a modest sedan, dressed casually, and seemed more interested in talking about books and travel than showing off expensive things. It wasn't until we'd been dating for 6 months that I realized just how wealthy his family was. The first time David took me to meet his parents, I was nervous but excited. I'd bought a new dress, practiced conversation topics, and hoped to make a good impression. What I walked into was a family dynamic I wasn't prepared for. Robert Williams, David's father, was warm and welcoming from the moment we met. He asked about my nursing studies, seemed genuinely interested in my opinions, and made sure I felt included in every conversation. "Please call me Dad," he said by the end of the evening. "Any woman who makes my son this happy is family to me." His wife, Margaret, was different. She was polite but cold, answering my questions with minimal responses and steering conversations away from me whenever possible. David's siblings, his older sister Claire and younger brother Michael, followed their mother's lead, treating me like temporary entertainment that would eventually disappear. But Robert was different. Over the years that followed, he became like a real father to me. My own dad had died when I was 19, and I'd missed having that paternal presence in my life. Robert filled that void completely. He attended my nursing school graduation when my own mother couldn't make it from out of state. He walked me down the aisle at our wedding when Margaret made it clear she thought the ceremony was unnecessarily elaborate for a second marriage, even though it was David's first marriage, too. He was the first person I called when I got my dream job at the Children's Hospital, and he celebrated with champagne like I'd won a Nobel Prize. David and I had been married for 3 years when Robert was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. Progression was slow at first, forgotten names, missed appointments, confusion about dates. But as the disease advanced, something beautiful happened. Robert's filter disappeared, and he began saying exactly what he thought about everyone. "Patricia," he said one day during a family dinner, "you're the only one who visits me just because you want to. Everyone else comes here to talk about money." Margaret's face flushed. "Dad, that's not fair." "Isn't it?" Robert looked around the table. "When's the last time any of you called to ask how I'm feeling instead of asking about your inheritance?" Tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Claire and Michael exchanged uncomfortable glances. David tried to change the subject. But Robert wasn't finished. "Tricia brings me books from the hospital library. She sits and reads to me when I'm having bad days. She remembers that I like my coffee black and my toast barely browned. You people remember that I have money." I was mortified by the confrontation, but also touched by Robert's words. After that dinner, the family's treatment of me went from cold to openly hostile. Claire started making comments about how I was obviously manipulating a sick old man. Michael would joke about me being the professional daughter-in-law who was working overtime for the inheritance. Margaret began referring to me as that woman instead of using my name. The worst part was that David, caught between his family and his wife, started pulling away from me emotionally. He'd grown up in this toxic dynamic and didn't know how to navigate it with a wife in the middle. "They're just protective of Dad," he'd say when I tried to talk to him about his family's behavior. "You have to understand, there have been women who tried to take advantage of him before. David, I've been part of this family for 8 years. When am I going to stop being treated like a gold digger?" "You're being dramatic, Patricia. They don't think you're a gold digger." But they did, and they made sure I knew it every chance they got. The comments got worse as Robert's condition deteriorated. Claire would make snide remarks about how convenient it was that I worked at the hospital where Robert was being treated. Michael would joke about me positioning myself perfectly for the inheritance. The Margarets started openly discussing the will in front of me, talking about how the money should stay with blood family. 2 years ago, Robert's condition took a sharp turn for the worse. He was moved to a memory care facility, and his lucid moments became increasingly rare. During one of my visits, when he briefly recognized me, he grabbed my hand and said something that confused me at the time. "Trisha, I fixed everything. Don't let them bully you anymore, okay?" I fixed it all. I thought he was just confused, so I squeezed his hand and promised I wouldn't let anyone bully me. Robert passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks ago. Despite all the family tension, his death hit me hard. He'd been more of a father to me than anyone since my own dad died, and losing him felt like losing a parent all over again. The funeral was a nightmare. Margaret and Claire treated me like hired help, asking me to coordinate with the caterers and handle guest parking while they dealt with important family matters. When people offered me condolences, Claire would interrupt to redirect attention to herself and Michael as the real family members who were grieving. During the reception, I overheard Margaret talking to her sister about the will reading. "The lawyer says we'll read the will on Thursday," she said. "Finally, we can distribute Robert's assets properly and move forward as a family." She said this while looking directly at me, making it clear that I wasn't included in her definition of family. David, still caught in the middle, suggested I take the day off work to attend the will reading. "I don't think that's necessary," I told him. "Your family has made it pretty clear that I'm not really part of the family discussions." "Trisha, don't be ridiculous. Of course you're family." But when Thursday morning arrived and we were getting ready to leave for the lawyer's office, David got a call from Claire. "She thinks maybe you should skip this one," he said after hanging up. "The will reading is going to be emotional, and Claire thinks it might be better with just blood relatives." I stared at my husband in disbelief. "David, are you seriously telling me not to attend your father's will reading because your sister doesn't want me there?" "It's not that simple, Patricia. There are family dynamics you don't understand. I've been part of this family for 15 years. What dynamics don't I understand? Look, why don't you just stay home this time? I'll tell you everything that happens." I felt like I'd been slapped. My own husband was choosing his siblings over me, asking me to stay home like a child while the adults handled important business. "Fine," I said, "but don't expect me to pretend this is okay." So David left for the lawyer's office while I sat at home, feeling humiliated and excluded from what should have been a family moment. An hour later, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me to answer. "Mrs. Patricia Williams? This is James Morrison, Robert Williams's attorney. I need you to come to my office immediately. You're named in Mr. Williams's will, and your presence is required for the reading." My heart started racing. "I'm sorry, but my husband's family said this was just for blood relatives. The Mrs. Williams, with respect, they don't get to decide who attends a will reading. Mr. Williams left specific instructions that you must be present. Can you come down here right away?" I threw on professional clothes and drove to the lawyer's office in a daze. When I walked into the building, I could hear raised voices coming from the conference room. The receptionist looked relieved to see me. "Mrs. Williams? Mr. Morrison has been trying to reach you. Please go right in." I opened the conference room door to find David, Margaret, Claire, and Michael sitting around a large table, all looking frustrated and confused. James Morrison, a distinguished man in his 60s, stood at the head of the table holding a thick document. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Williams," he said warmly. "We couldn't proceed without you." Margaret looked at me like I was an uninvited party crasher. "I'm sorry, but this is a private family matter." "Actually," Mr. Morrison said firmly, "Mrs. Williams is central to this family matter. Please, Patricia, have a seat." The only empty chair was directly across from Claire, who glared at me like I was personally responsible for delaying her inheritance. "Now that everyone is present," Mr. Morrison began, "I can read Robert Williams's last will and testament." He began with the standard legal language, then moved to specific bequests. Margaret would receive the house and $100,000. Claire would get $150,000 and Robert's art collection. Michael would receive $150,000 and the vintage car collection. David inherited the vacation cabin and $200. I sat quietly, assuming I might receive some small sentimental item, maybe a piece of jewelry or a photo. The family looked pleased with their distributions, already discussing plans for their inheritances. Then Mr. Morrison continued reading. "To my beloved daughter-in-law, Patricia Williams, who has shown me more love, respect, and genuine care than I have received from anyone else in my final years." The room went dead silent. I felt my face flush with embarrassment, assuming I was about to be thanked for my kindness with some token gift. "I leave the entirety of Williams Auto Group, including all dealerships, real estate holdings, investment accounts, and business assets, with a current estimated value of $2.3 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire's mouth fell open. Michael's face went white. Margaret looked like she was about to faint. David stared at me in complete shock. "I'm sorry," Claire finally sputtered. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," Mr. Morrison replied calmly. "Mrs. Williams is now the sole owner of the family business and all associated assets." "That's impossible." Michael stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "Dad wouldn't leave the business to someone who's not even a real family member." "I assure you, the will is legally binding and properly executed," Mr. Morrison said. "However, Mr. Williams did leave a letter explaining his decision. Would you like me to read it?" Margaret found her voice. "Yes, we absolutely want to hear this explanation." Mr. Morrison opened a sealed envelope and began reading Robert's letter in his own words. "To my family, if you're hearing this letter, it means you're probably upset about my decision to leave the business to Patricia. Let me explain why I made this choice. For the past 5 years, as my mind has been failing, only one person has treated me with consistent dignity, respect, and love. Patricia has visited me every week, not to ask about money or inheritance, but simply to spend time with me. She reads to me, brings me coffee the way I like it, and talks to me like I'm still a human being worth knowing. Meanwhile, my biological children have treated me like a burden and an ATM machine. Margaret, you haven't had a real conversation with me in 3 years that didn't involve asking about your inheritance. Claire, you've made it clear that you consider visits to your father a chore to be endured. Michael, you only call when you need money. But Patricia has been a true daughter to me. She's earned this inheritance through years of genuine love and care. The business will be in good hands with someone who understands the value of treating people with dignity. I hope this decision teaches you something about what family really means. It's not about blood, it's about love, respect, and showing up for each other when it matters. Patricia, you've been the daughter I always hoped to have. Use this gift wisely, and don't let anyone make you feel guilty for accepting what you've earned. Love, Dad." The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Claire was crying, not from grief, but from rage. Michael was pacing by the window, muttering under his breath. Margaret sat frozen, staring at the table. David was the first to speak. "Patricia, I had no idea Dad was planning this. I looked at my husband, this man who had just asked me to stay home because I wasn't real family, and felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Neither did I, David. But apparently your father saw something in me that the rest of you couldn't." Claire exploded. "This is ridiculous. You manipulated a sick old man into leaving you everything. We'll contest this will." Mr. Morrison adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Robinson, I should mention that Mr. Williams anticipated potential challenges to his will. He had extensive psychological evaluations done to confirm his mental competency when this will was executed. He also provided detailed documentation of his reasoning, including recordings of family interactions that concerned him. Recordings? Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. Mr. Williams was quite disturbed by the way Mrs. Patricia Williams was being treated by his biological children. He documented several instances of disrespect, exclusion, and what he termed financial vulturing. These recordings will be presented to any court that hears a will contest. The blood drained from Claire's face. I remembered all those family dinners where Robert had seemed more alert than usual, those moments when he'd asked pointed questions about how I was being treated. He'd been gathering evidence. Michael stopped pacing and turned to face me. You can't seriously be planning to take everything. The business has been in our family for 40 years. I stood up slowly, feeling a strength I hadn't known I possessed. Michael, you're right. The business has been in your family for 40 years. And now your father has chosen to keep it in the family by leaving it to the person he considered his true daughter. You're not his daughter, Claire screamed. You're a gold digger who manipulated a dying man. Actually, I said calmly, I'm exactly what your father said I am. I'm the person who loved him without conditions, who spent time with him without expectations, who treated him with dignity when his own biological children treated him like a burden. I turned to Mr. Morrison. What do I need to do to assume control of the business? We'll need to meet next week to transfer all the assets and accounts. The dealerships are profitable and well managed, so the transition should be smooth. Margaret finally found her voice. Patricia, surely we can work something out. Robert couldn't have meant for you to take everything. We're his children. I looked at this woman who had spent 15 years making me feel like an outsider, who had excluded me from family decisions, who had just that morning declared I wasn't welcome at my own father-in-law's will reading. Margaret, you're absolutely right. You are his children. And he chose to leave his legacy to the person he felt had earned it through love and respect rather than biological accident. David cleared his throat. Patricia, this is huge. We need to talk about this at home. I looked at my husband, this man who had just chosen his siblings over his wife, who had asked me to stay home while the real family handled important business. Do we, David? Because this morning you made it pretty clear that I'm not real family. Your father disagreed. The drive home was silent. David kept glancing at me like he was seeing me for the first time. When we got to our house, the house we'd bought with my nursing salary and his modest job at one of his father's dealerships, he finally spoke. Patricia, I'm sorry about this morning. I should have insisted you come to the will reading. David, this morning was just the latest in 15 years of your family treating me like an outsider and you doing nothing to stop it. I know my family can be difficult, but they're still my family. And what am I? He didn't answer right away, which told me everything I needed to know. You're my wife. Your wife who apparently isn't real family. Your wife who you asked to stay home while the important people made important decisions. Patricia, I was trying to keep the peace. By excluding me. By choosing them over me. Again. We sat in our living room, the room where I'd hosted countless family dinners, where I'd tried for years to build bridges with his siblings, where I'd cried after every family gathering that ended with me feeling like an outsider. What happens now? David asked. I thought about Robert's letter, about his hope that this decision would teach his family what family really means. I thought about 15 years of trying to earn acceptance from people who were determined never to give it. Now I decide what to do with a $2.3 million inheritance that I never expected or asked for. And us? What happens to us? I looked at my husband, this man I'd loved for 15 years, who had never quite learned to choose me over his toxic family. I don't know, David. I really don't know. The next week was a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers, accountants, and business managers. Taking over Williams Auto Group was overwhelming, but the business was well run with excellent staff who made the transition smooth. More overwhelming was the reaction from David's family. The phone call started immediately. Margaret called crying, begging me to do the right thing and share the inheritance with Robert's real children. Claire left voicemails that ranged from fake friendly to openly threatening, suggesting I was stealing money that belonged to them. Michael sent text messages accusing me of elder abuse and fraud, but the most difficult conversation was with David. "Patricia, you have to understand how hard this is for them," he said over dinner. "They grew up expecting to inherit the family business. And I grew up expecting to be treated with basic respect by my husband's family. We don't always get what we expect, but you could share it. You could give them each a portion of the business. You don't need $2.3 million. I set down my fork and stared at my husband. "David, are you seriously asking me to give away an inheritance I received because your father valued me more than his biological children? I'm asking you to consider what's fair." "What's fair?" "Let me tell you what would have been fair. Fair would have been your family treating me with respect for the past 15 years. Fair would have been being included in family decisions instead of being told I'm not real family. Fair would have been my husband standing up for me instead of always choosing to keep the peace with his siblings. That's not fair, Patricia. You know I love you. Do I? 'Cause loving someone means choosing them, protecting them, standing up for them. When have you ever done that for me?" David couldn't answer because we both knew he never had 2 weeks after the will reading. I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I called Margaret, Claire, and Michael and asked them to meet me at the lawyer's office. They arrived looking hopeful, probably expecting me to announce that I was sharing the inheritance after all. "I've made a decision about your father's business," I began. "But first, I want to read you something." I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. "This is a list of every time one of you made me feel unwelcome in the past 5 years. Margaret, you told guests at your Christmas party that I was the help when I was arranging the catering you asked me to handle. Claire, you spent David's birthday dinner explaining to everyone why mixed marriages don't work. Michael, you asked me to leave family photos because I wasn't really family." Their faces grew increasingly uncomfortable as I continued reading. "This is a list of every time you excluded me from family decisions, every time you made comments about me being a gold digger, every time you treated your father's love for me like it was a character flaw on his part." "Patricia," Margaret interrupted, "we know we weren't always perfect, but I'm not finished," I said firmly. "I also want to read you something else. This is a list of every time your father defended me to you, every time he told you to treat me with respect, every time he expressed disappointment in how his children were behaving toward the woman he considered his daughter." The room was silent. "Your father left me his business because I earned it. Not through manipulation or gold digging, but through 15 years of genuine love and respect. The same love and respect you couldn't give him because you were too busy measuring your inheritance." Claire was crying now. "We're sorry, Patricia. We know we made mistakes. You're sorry because I ended up with the money. You're not sorry for how you treated me or your father." I stood up and looked at each of them. "I've decided to sell Williams Auto Group. I've received an offer from a competitor for $2.8 million. The sale will be final next month." Their faces lit up with hope. "However," I continued, "I won't be sharing the proceeds with any of you." The hope died instantly. "Instead, I'm establishing the Robert Williams Foundation for Alzheimer's Research and Family Support. The entire $2.8 million will fund research and programs to help families dealing with dementia." Margaret gasped. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Your father's money will be used to help other families avoid the pain he experienced watching his biological children care more about his assets than his well-being." "Patricia, please," Michael begged. "We'll do better. We'll treat you like family from now on. You had 15 years to treat me like family. Your father gave you chance after chance to show him love and respect. You chose greed instead. I gathered my papers and stood to leave. The foundation will be announced in the local newspaper next week. Anyone who wants to contest the will or the foundation is welcome to try. Mr. Morrison has assured me that your father's psychological evaluations and recordings will make any legal challenge very difficult. As I reached the door, Claire called out desperately, "What about David? You're punishing him too." I turned back to face them. David has spent our entire marriage choosing you over me. Now he can have what he's always prioritized. That evening, I told David about my decision to donate the inheritance to charity. "Patricia, I understand you're angry, but giving away $2.8 million to prove a point seems extreme." "I'm not proving a point, David. I'm honoring your father's values. He believed in treating people with dignity and respect. This foundation will help other families learn that lesson before it's too late." "And what about us? What about our future?" I looked at my husband, this man who still didn't understand that his family's behavior toward me had been wrong, who still thought I should compromise and share money I'd earned through years of love and kindness. "David, I've spent 15 years trying to build a future with someone who would never choose me over his family's toxic behavior. I think it's time I built a future with someone who values me the way your father did. Are you leaving me?" "I'm choosing myself for the first time in our marriage." The divorce was finalized 6 months later. David got to keep the house and his job at the dealership until it was sold. I moved to a smaller city where I could work at a hospital that partnered with the Robert Williams Foundation. The foundation has grown beyond anything I imagined. We've funded 3 major research studies and established support groups in 12 cities. Every family we help is a testament to Robert's belief that love should be unconditional and respect should be earned through kindness. I received one last voicemail from Margaret about a year after the foundation was announced. "Patricia, I hope you're happy with yourself. You've destroyed our family over money that should have belonged to Robert's children." She still didn't understand. It was never about the money. I kept Robert's letter framed on my desk at the foundation office. Whenever I'm having a difficult day, I read the part where he calls me the daughter I always hoped to have. Some people are born into families. Others earn their place through love, respect, and showing up when it matters. Robert Williams taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about choosing to love someone unconditionally and treating them with dignity even when it's difficult. His biological children learned too late that inheritance isn't something you're entitled to, it's something you earn. And sometimes the person who earns it isn't the one anyone expected. If you enjoyed this story of family dynamics and unexpected inheritance, please give this video a like and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of justice served. Share your own experiences with in-law drama in the comments below. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your spouse's family? Remember, family isn't about who shares your DNA. It's about who treats you with love and respect when it costs them nothing but means everything to you. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is living well and using your blessings to make the world a better place.